Andrea, menopause expert. I'm so happy that we finally connected and that you are here today to give all your juicy knowledge to my audience, who most of them are going through menopause or they're in perimenopause and they're kind of wondering what the hell's happening with their body, and they're looking down that path of what they know is to come, that
Oh,
menopause
yeah.
path, right? Or they're looking at other women or their mom or their friends and going, oh God, I don't want to go through that. That just looks like it sucks. So we're going to kind of break through that mindset today
Yes.
and tell them things that they can be even doing right now, right now. So thank you for jumping on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation.
So you're a researcher. I mean, right before
Um,
we started, you bring up this big like pile of papers with all the research. So yeah, tell me your story. Like, how did you get into diving into research and helping women in menopause? What's your background?
so I'm a nutritionist, a holistic nutritionist. I've been one for for a really long time, almost 20 years. And I come from the natural health and wellness space. So I've been in the health and wellness space for almost 25 years. So I've been around a long time.
Mhm.
And it started really, I'd say the menopause part of it started, and everything I do comes from personal experience, wanting to figure out why it's happening to my body, and then saying, okay, well, I'm learning about it. I'm just going to share it with everybody I know. Like there's just like a natural progression of what I've always done with my career. And when I was 47, I got my first hot flash, and I thought, wait a minute. Am I in menopause? I didn't know the word perimenopause existed. I thought I was in menopause from that one hot flash. And
Okay.
that led me down my like road of trying to figure everything out. So, but then what's interesting, Amy, is that I I had my third baby at 41. And at 42, none of my symptoms were going away. Like, some of them kind of were improving, but others were getting worse. And I'm like, what's going on? And I wasn't sleeping. My moods were all over the place. I had lost my weight from having a baby, but then I was gaining weight and then I was losing weight, like weight fluctuations and just so many different things. I was exhausted and I thought, well, and I didn't really understand why it was happening. I was having phantom smells. That's when you smell things that other people don't,
Mhm.
which now we know can be a symptom of perimenopause and menopause. Of course, getting everything checked out to make sure that there's no other underlying reasons for it. And then when I got that first hot flash and I started doing my deep dives into my research, I was like, wait a minute, everything's connected. And that's why I always look at it as like a puzzle and I'm always learning new things. So now I realize, I started perimenopause probably as early as 36 and had my first hot flash at 47, put everything together. And now I realize I was in perimenopause for about 14 years, 11 of which I had no idea I was in perimenopause.
Okay. Yes.
And that's why that's why I don't want other women to go through what I'm going through. I remember asking, this, and it's so vivid to me. I remember asking my friends, my colleagues, so is this happening to you? Are you gaining weight or is your mood all
Right.
over the place? And they'd be like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, is it only me? Am I the only person in the world that's experiencing this? But nobody can understand why. Going to the doctors, trying to get tests. I got MRIs done for the phantom smells. And everyone's like, we don't know what's wrong with you. So I was like, well, I guess it just must be me. But it's not just me. And now that's what I'm realizing and why I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing. I just don't want women to go through what I went through. I want them to understand what perimenopause is, to understand what menopause is, to understand the 100 plus symptoms, which is what my research has shown. So
Mhm.
I know that's a very long answer, but it's the truth. I'm so passionate about helping women so that they don't have to experience what I did, the lack of
No,
knowledge.
I
Right?
think that's awesome. And as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, wait, if this person who has been an expert in the space, nutritionist, it's not like you're out of tune with the body or with health things or how the body works in general. That's your jam. And
Thank
you
you.
didn't even know. And so as you're saying this, light bulbs are just lighting up in my head going, oh my God, there's women out there that don't know that they're in perimenopause or menopause. They don't even know. So this is kind of mind blowing and mind opening for me right now. I'm even thinking like, what are we going to call this podcast? Because I want the women to click on it who are in your state, who are in your shoes, that they're like, well, I had this one random flash. I don't know whether it's a hot flash or is it like my metabolism or am I just pissed off or is it cortisol or my adrenals or whatever. and they just don't know. So I love this. I love this conversation. So where do you want to go over the symptoms, or do you want to kind of stay in the research, or you want to do symptoms first, then research? How do you want to walk this
Let's
path?
do both. So I
Okay.
just want to acknowledge one thing you said. So by the way, and you and I didn't speak before this. I mean, we were texting, but we never spoke about what we were going to talk about. You just hit the nail on the head. That is what I say all the time. I was in the health space. This is what I do for a living, and I had no idea.
Right.
So yes to that. So thank you for acknowledging that, and that is the truth, and that's what I talk about all the time. Okay,
Cool.
so let's go to the research. So several years ago, I was at a party and I was talking to a friend of mine who said she was starting an app for menopausal symptoms. And I remember saying to her at the time, I was with my husband and I looked and I'm like, menopausal symptoms? Is there an app that can are there enough symptoms out there that you can actually create an entire app for them? And she was like, yeah, there's like 35 to 40 symptoms. There's a lot. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. So I came home, and the way my brain works, Amy, is I'm very data driven and, research data. Like for me, I love to see like, okay, so if there's 35, 40 symptoms, I need to know what they all are. So I started tracking them in a document. And this was like, going back 5, 6 years ago. And then what started to happen was I was like, wait a minute, there's way more than 35 or 40. And then I got up to like 85. And then I was like, that's a lot of symptoms that people aren't talking about. And so that led me, and because I love research so much, to create a survey. And we started it was I think it's 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, that we launched this survey. It'll be 2 years in August. And I remember, so I asked women, like, what are the symptoms that you're experiencing? And then when we analyzed the data, so we first analyzed the data based on 3,200 women, 3,200 responses. We're now getting close to 5,000. So I'm so excited to see what the difference in the data is. But what we found was that there are way more than 85. There's 103 plus symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. So way more than the 35, 40, way more than the 85 that I thought, 103 plus. So that's where I was like, wait, whoa. 100 plus symptoms that women have no idea that what they're experiencing could be. Now, there's always different reasons for it, could be perimenopause and menopause. And that's what got me excited about my research, to be like, okay, well, what are those symptoms? What are women experiencing? And women, the research says that about 11 to 13 to 15% of women, or 13 to 15% of women, don't experience any symptoms. And I challenge that statistic, because I believe that they're thinking about the most common ones, the 35 to 40.
Yep.
They're not thinking about all the other symptoms that they could be experiencing.
Yep. I agree. I totally agree, because that's the same way with thyroid too. I sat next to a woman on a plane. She's like, yeah, I have a thyroid problem, but I take Synthroid. I'm good. And I'm like, so you don't have any symptoms, right? She goes, no, I'm good. And I'm like, she's carrying an extra 50 pounds. Her hair is thin and straw. Like, I don't even think she realizes that those are symptoms related to thyroid that she could actually improve if she wanted to. I think too many people get used to feeling bad.
100%. And they get used to feeling bad, but also when you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yep.
if you don't know that you're not supposed to be, your hair is not supposed to be falling out, or you don't know that your mood's not supposed to be all over the place, then you're not going to look to see why that's happening. Right. You're just kind of like, yeah, you get used to it over time too. Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's important. So I'll go over the top 10 most common symptoms. And actually, I'll ask you, I always say that, I'm like, okay, when I ask a room full of people, which you're my N of 1 right now.
Okay.
What's the first symptom you think about when you think about menopause? What's like the number one symptom you would think about?
Well, we said hot flash. Hot flash.
Okay. So
Right.
I said hot flashes, but is that the first thing you would think about? Right. Okay. And in your case, you might be like thyroid, but so hot flashes are the most common. Now, when you look at the list of symptoms and where hot flashes actually go, where they stand on that list, they're at the bottom. They're like number 9.
Really?
Yeah. And this was based on the 3,000 women. I see it's changing a little bit. It's going up a little bit as we get to the 5,000, but it's like it's at the bottom of the top 10, which is fascinating. Okay. So the number one most common symptom across the board, and this is, across perimenopause and menopause, with 72% of women experiencing it, is exhaustion, fatigue. Again, a very common side effect of a low thyroid, right? Of hypothyroidism. Then there's brain fog. Then there's sleep issues. Sleep is number 3. Then there's memory loss or forgetfulness, anxiety, joint pain, lack of concentration, lack of focus, hot flashes, and then libido. So those are the top 10. And then when you go into the top 15, you've got, other things like lack of patience, night sweats, slower metabolism, and digestive issues. So you've got the weight gain that kind of come up there. But even so, weight gain, interestingly enough, isn't in the top 10 as well, right? So
Right.
and it starts to creep up as the numbers go up, but those are the most common symptoms. But you wouldn't think fatigue is necessarily a perimenopause or menopause symptom.
Right. I would probably go thyroid for that. I would go thyroid for the brain fog. I mean, I know that they cross over so
Oh,
much,
big time.
so much. But yeah, you're right. I wouldn't think of those as my top 5. If I rattle them off, they wouldn't be my top 5 or top 10.
Right.
What about the wacky symptoms? Like what about like symptom 90 through 100 that we don't even ever ever think about ever and tie to
Okay,
menopause?
so I call them the lesser known symptoms.
Yeah.
So I would say probably the one that is like, well, so the phantom smells, definitely the one that I mentioned before. So smelling things, and the way my brain works is I always want to know, okay, but like how does that pertain to women in perimenopause and menopause? So we did more research on that, and which I can get into in a minute. So we've got phantom smells, we've got BO. This is a big one too, where women
Okay.
all of a sudden are like, wait a minute, how come I stink? And it's normally in one armpit, not necessarily, it could be one or both, but it's like my left armpit. So a lot of women, just their body odor is changing, and it's like a more pungent smell. Like it's not something like they've never smelled before. So that's another one. Dizziness, vertigo, tinnitus, electric shocks. You might feel like electric shocks, like in in different parts of your body,
Yes,
itchy
I have heard
ears,
that before. Like I've heard some of my patients say like a vibrating feeling. Like,
vibrations. That's internal vibrations. That's another one. And itchy ears.
mm,
That's a huge one. So their ears. So what's happening is as estrogen levels are going down, the mucous membrane, so our skin and including the mucous membranes in our ears are starting to get drier and itchier, right? So they start to itch. So itchy ears is a really big one. Easy fix, omega-3s, fixes it really nicely. Dry eyes, watery eyes, that's another one. So you think, oh, my eyes aren't dry, they're watering all the time. It's actually dry eyes. Burning scalp, burning mouth, health anxiety, that's another big one. And cold flashes, that's another one. And women will be like, yeah, I'm freezing, I'm so cold all the time. So we know hot flashes, but cold flashes are also a lesser known common symptom.
okay. Crazy interesting. This is all right. This is amazing. I love it. I love it. Keep going. Okay. What'd you find in your research then with all of these symptoms? Or that's what you dove into with the research, is finding that there's so much out there that correlates so many different symptoms with menopause.
So what I decided to do was, so we know that phantom smells was one, so I was like, okay, well, let me dig a little bit deeper into understanding what those phantom smells are.
Mhm.
I dug deeper into sleep. I dug deeper into anxiety. So I just went a little bit deeper on some of those more common ones. And then I also looked at women in the workplace. I looked at menopause stigmas. So I looked at different things and doctor visits, which is fascinating, which I can tell you. So let me start with phantom smells.
Mhm.
So the most common phantom smells for women in this phase of life are smoke, which by far, that's like 58% of women are experiencing the smell of smoke. That could be campfire, cigars, cigarettes, it doesn't matter. Burning wood, like whatever it is, it's smoke is the number one. So you'd
Okay.
be like, wait a second, is anyone smoking in here? Nope, I'm not smoking in here. And it's like, and again, I want to be clear, it's when you're smelling something that other people aren't. If it's actually there in the environment, it's not considered to be a phantom smell. That's just saying you have a great sense of smell. So to be very clear, because I get that question a lot. So I just want to make sure. The
Right.
second one is mildew. So 58% of women smell smoke, and then it drops to 25%. So you could see that's like by far the number one phantom smell.
Yeah.
Mildew is number two, then BO is number three, electricity or overheated electronics, then
Mhm.
weed, cat pee, sulfur, sewage, raw eggs, or like rotten eggs, burn plastic, burn rubber again, burn toast, rotten food. And then some women actually have sweet smells like chrysanthemums, like some flowers, perfume, chicken soup, garlic, onions. I'm like, why couldn't I be that person having blueberry muffin smells? I always had the bad ones. I was like, ugh. So some women do have sweeter smells or better smells. So that's interesting. I thought that was really eye opening for me. I didn't realize that you can actually have a good smell or a sweet phantom smell.
Yeah. No, that's some good news that amongst the 100 plus symptoms that we get to
Exactly.
experience as women. Good Lord. Okay.
Crazy, right? And then there's sleep. So then we looked into sleep. So why aren't we not sleeping? We know it's the number 3 most common symptom, but why are we not sleeping? So the number one reason we're not sleeping in this phase of life is because of stress and anxiety. So if you're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., it's generally because cortisol is rising at the wrong time, and you might have a hard time. So you might wake up, kind of wide awake and have a hard time falling back asleep. So that's number one, is the stress. Number two is the bathroom visits. I've had women tell me they go to the bathroom every hour on the hour. If you're waking up more than once a night to go to the bathroom, once is considered to be common. I know, I'm talking to a thyroid expert, so we're going to be this, very specific, common versus optimal.
Right.
So there was the, we know that it's, to go once a night, that's in the normal common, that's common. But if it's more than once a night, then, you want to look into, ways that can help to improve that. And then the number 3 one is hot flash, is night sweats. So you're waking up from night sweats. So those are the 3 main reasons that we're waking up from, not getting that good night's sleep that we so need, which is so important as we go into this phase of life.
Now, let me ask you about that. So the waking up from stress and cortisol, I mean, it can be argued, well, a 30-year-old could wake up in the middle of the night with elevated stress if there's a situation they're dealing with, problem at work, their kids acting up, whatever. With menopausal women, is that like a stress response not associated with an actual situation that they're having?
Excellent question. So yes. So as we go into perimenopause and menopause, we're more prone to stress and anxiety, and we're less able to cope with it. So it's all of it together. So it's something that's just unfortunately starts to happen to us. So we did some research to find out from women, what percentage of you, we know that we're more anxious as we get into this phase of life, but what percentage of you? And 66% of women, and there was a research that we did with over 1,200 responses, that 66% of the women say they're more stressed now than they were before and less able to cope with it.
Mhm.
So that's why it's so important. And I talk a lot about that on my website, which is wearemorphous.com, and my social media, which I love, my TikTok page. But I talk a lot about managing our stress levels because of those 2 things that I just mentioned. So taking walks in nature, spending time with family that you want to spend time with, right? And minimizing those that, or maybe it's family, friends, whatever it is, minimizing things that create or cause you stress. One of the things I joke about when I do my TikTok lives, I'm like, okay, so who else, when you're watching a movie these days and it's a movie that's like really stressful, who can't watch it anymore? I'm like, me, I can't. Like, I get anxious watching like thrillers or watching like these movies that I'm like, oh, it's creating too much stress for me. So I have to be mindful of who I spend time with, who I'm like, what I'm watching, whether that
Mhm.
be the news or a movie that's, or reading a book or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
you want to just be mindful, putting down barriers, making sure that, boundaries, setting up barriers that, that are not going to exacerbate your stress. Because for some women, the stress is exacerbated. For others, it's newly onset. And I think that's an important thing to mention. So just finding ways that are going to help you reduce that stress. Could be meditation, could be deep breathing, whatever it is for you, dancing, singing, whatever it is for you that works.
Okay. Now, thank you for clarifying that, because that's what I was wondering. I'm like, well, wait a minute. We're all under stress. So, and I hear that actually more from men than from women, because I think as women, we don't want to admit that things are stressing us out more than they used to. But the guys are like, wow, I am way more stressed now and can't handle the stress I used to in my 20s and 30s. Like they'll admit to it. But the women are like, no, I got this. I can multitask 10
Mm.
million things and take on the world. It's cool. And then they're waking up at 2 a.m. To your
Oh
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? And that's a good point. I have to tell you, and I think you're younger than me. I'm 54, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, you know what? All of this pretending and trying to be something that I'm not, I'm so done with that part of my life. Like I really am. It's like, this is me. I know what I'm really good at, and I also know what I'm not really good at. And I'm much more vocal. And this is like, to your point earlier of like, oh my gosh, the doom and gloom, there's a lot of really cool things about going into perimenopause and menopause. And once you're in menopause and you've kind of crossed over, peri is very tumultuous for many people. It's
Mhm.
the recalibration, right, of so many things that are going on in our life. But once your hormones settle and you're in the menopausal range, for a lot of women, the symptoms get better, and not for everybody. And for some, they might get worse. But the difference is you've got the mental emotional aspect of it, where I really find that we come into our own. We really start to own it, and we really start to say like, hey, this is me. You like it, great. You don't, then maybe I'm just not your cup of tea, right? And so
Mhm.
it's trying to figure out who you are and finding yourself again and reestablishing who you are. Maybe you're creating a new version of yourself. So there's so many great things that happen as we go into menopause that are super exciting to look forward to.
Right, right. No, I'm glad you said that too, because that even reminds me, right, these women in perimenopause, it's almost like you have to tell them, "Listen, we will do whatever we can for you, but you're still gonna be on a little bit of a roller coaster," because that's exactly what's happening. There's this whole recalibration. Hormones are up, and then they're down, and then they're okay, and then they're up, and they're down, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you have to almost be ready for a little bit of a ride, whereas menopausal women, listen, we can get y'all settled into menopause. We can treat you how we're going to treat you, do the lifestyle changes, all that. And then you can just kind of coast.
You
Your
can
hormones are in the tank now. If you use BHRT, we can bring them up. But even if you do what we're going to talk about today, now you can just kind of coast.
and you could coast and I like to say that there are things that are in our control, and then there's a lot of things that are out of our control.
Hmm.
So the things that are in our control, like nutrition, lifestyle, like supplements, like whatever, like so whatever it is that you could, and whether and that could be hormones, whatever it is, these things are that we can control, then we can do what we can to help improve it. Now, the things we can't control, we can't control, right? So I always say try to do what you can within your control. And that, when it looks at, let's say, nutrition, when we look at nutrition, try to focus on eating protein, more protein, getting more protein in your diet. Try to focus on minimizing things like ultra processed foods or ultra processed sugar or trans fats, things that we know, or food additives, things that we know that can negatively impact our bodies and overall health as we go into perimenopause and menopause. So that's kind of my outlook. And I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, actually, and I'm just finishing the sleep chapter.
Okay.
And I'm just like, it's cool because it'll be out next year. And what's cool is that it's like there are so many cool things there's so many things that we can do to help control our now, like I said, there's many things we can't, but there are so many things that we can do to help control our symptoms, how we're feeling, our mindset. So it's like tricking. It's like the little tips and tricks that can help us kind of get back to that balance so that we can feel better. Because when we're in the weeds, like you said, it is very hard to be able to see the positivity in anything. I was there. I had probably 100 of the 103 symptoms. Like I had so many bad symptoms. I could not control them. I was like, what is happening with my body? Like I felt like I had very little control, which is why I started doing the research that I did because I wanted to get back some of that control that I'd be like, okay, it's not taking all of me here. Like I got to
Yeah.
pull the reins back and be like, okay, what can I do to help to manage some of these symptoms?
Right. Right. Okay. So symptoms, research, what can we do? What did you do? What was your path like after as you were dealing with 100 plus symptoms, you poor thing, my God. What can we do?
Well, so like I mentioned before, like so nutrition is a big part of it. So
Yeah.
the way what we ate, things that we did, the way we lived our life before we got here is very different once we are in the next phase. And you might have been able to have a glass of wine before bed and you were fine. But now that alcohol, disrupts your sleep. Once it's metabolized, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
Maybe that it's affecting your brain. You might think, well, I'm already forgetful and I have brain fog. Maybe it exacerbates that. Maybe
Mhm.
it's going to cause you to have a hot flash like me. I have a sip of wine. I'm done. I cannot do wine anymore. I can't even do alcohol anymore. Like it just doesn't work for me now anymore. I wasn't a huge drinker before, but I loved my Prosecco. I loved my wine. Now I can't
Yeah.
have it anymore because of and it's all choices, by the way. I can have it. I choose not to because I don't want to deal with night sweats all night. I don't want to disrupt my sleep because of the list on a list of priority. Gut health and sleep are two of the most important things because, they're the foundation for so much of how we're going to live or our overall health in this phase of life. Right. So these were important things. So nutrition, making sure that you're getting the protein, like I said, making sure you're getting your vegetables, your starchy vegetables, 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day, good quality
Why
fats like
is that
avocado.
important? Stay there for a second.
Fiber?
Yeah, because we hear a lot about that in the perimenopause, menopause space. Women are going out and they're buying meta frickin' mucil, which I'm
Oh my
like, I
god.
just shake my head. I'm like, oh God. So can you
Yep,
explain
nope.
the fiber piece, why we hear that so much tied to menopause, and then bring in the what type of fiber that should actually be outside of
Sure.
menopausal? Yeah.
So I know many of you are listening to this, but if you're watching this, are you going to put this? Is this going to be available on
Yep.
YouTube?
Yep.
Okay. So if you're on YouTube or anywhere else where you can see the visual, I have a product behind me called Fiber Us.
Mhm.
So we launched our company, Morphus, with Fiber Us. Why? As a nutritionist, digestion is so important, right? So we want to make sure, especially now, we want to make sure we're going to the bathroom every single day, at least once a day. Why? Because we need to make sure that we are getting rid of things that our body no longer needs. Bacteria, food waste, like things that we are exposed to on a regular basis, toxicants, right? We want those out of our body. If they don't go out of our body, they can recirculate and cause issues for us, right?
Mhm. Right.
When our digestive system is working optimally, then other organs are working optimally too. Because when it's not, then it can back up. It can affect the liver, it can affect the kidneys, it can affect different organs, right, in our body. So you want to make sure that for the fact that your body's functioning properly, you want to make sure you're pooping every day. Estrogens are breaking down, hormones are breaking down. When you don't get them out of your body, again, they can recirculate and cause other issues. So those are just some of the reasons. The other reasons are it helps with satiating yourself. So for many of us, we get hungrier, especially in perimenopause. Our hormone called ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, is highest in perimenopause. So if you're hungrier, adding some protein, adding some fiber, and this is through fruits and vegetables, always diet first. And if you need extra help, we've got Fiber Us. It has, 6.5 grams of soluble fiber per serving. So you
Mhm.
just want to make sure that you're getting it through your food, because that's really important. The other reason why is because fiber has prebiotics as well. So there are certain vegetables, right, that have prebiotics. Prebiotics are food for the good bacteria in our gut. Why is good bacteria important? Because good bacteria helps with our immune system, our digestion, as well as our mental health. So you probably heard of probiotics, you probably heard of good bacteria. You want to
Mhm.
make sure that we keep that bacteria happy and healthy in our gut. So things like Jerusalem artichoke, carrots with the peels on, jicama, garlic, asparagus. These are prebiotic foods, resistant starch foods that help to feed that good bacteria in our gut. So those are just some of the reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but I would say those are just some of the reasons that we really want to make sure that we are. And I've had women who will say, like, well, I poop every day. And I'm like, great. You could still use fiber. You could still make sure you're still getting your 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day, because maybe you could be pooping twice a day, or maybe
Mhm.
you can be pooping 3 times a day, right? But absolutely at least once a day. If you're not, please, please, please increase your fiber or consider a fiber supplement.
Okay. No, that's exactly what I was looking for, because I think a lot of people don't understand when and why to use fiber. They only think that you're going to add it in if you're constipated, and that's not the
No.
case at all.
Yeah. Yeah, not at all. So very important. That's why it's part of our foundation supplements, because I'm like, we need fiber. Like it's absolutely critical. So I would say, so make sure you're getting enough fiber. Hydration is really important too, because
Mhm.
when you're not hydrated, it can affect your sleep, it can affect your memory, it can affect your muscles. Like it affects so many different things. So I always say aim to drink half your weight in ounces if you can, and it doesn't only have to be water. It could be through soup, through vegetables, like through herbal tea. There are a lot of things that help with hydration.
Mhm.
So that's important. And then you also want, in more minimal amounts is complex carbohydrates, your legumes, your nuts and seeds. These are things that it's really, it comes down to having a whole foods diet, and that's kind of how I look at it. Minimizing the ultra processed foods, making what you can at home. We're all super busy, so I get that. So packaged foods, many of us reach for them. Listen, I have 3 kids. Like it's we're living in the real world, so I
Mhm.
get that. But if you can live by that 80/20 rule, that could be very helpful.
Well, and I love this talk. I want to stay on nutrition and unpack just a little more, because I know the mentality of my audience, more specifically my patients. And I know that even once we start, let's say BHRT, and
Mhm.
we're putting them on hormones and we're getting those adjusted, we're getting them on the right thyroid medication, all of that, they move into a thought process of, well, now that I'm doing the BHRT and the thyroid, and this might even be a subconscious thought, talk, whatever going on in your mind. But now that I'm moving into optimization, I don't really have to pay attention to my nutrition quite
Mm.
as much, right? Because the meds and the hormones, they're going to come in and save me. And I think by so beautifully, I'm so thankful that we're having this conversation, by bringing together, your point of we have choices. You are making the choice to not drink alcohol because you know what it does to the body and you know what you are going to deal with, and you're choosing not to. I think a lot of women out there know what processed food does to their body, know what alcohol does to their body, know what not drinking enough does, and they just blow it off because they don't actually want to face it. Whereas you're saying, listen, it can be as important as what you put in your mouth compared to the creams that you're rubbing on your skin in terms of how you're going to feel. And if you're going to put, let's say, processed food into your mouth and you make that choice, then you're going to have to deal with the cascade of hormonal imbalances and symptoms that come with it. It might be 10 symptoms, it might be 30 symptoms. And then you have to sit back and say, is that worth it to deal with that cascade of symptoms that just happened in my body?
100,000,000%. And I hear about it. I hear a lot like from women all the time. They're like, well, if I'm doing this, then I don't have to do that. And I'm like, it's not true. So here's what it's important. And I always say you're the captain of your own ship. And it does come down to choices. So we know, so you could be on hormones, but if you're still eating trans fats or you're eating foods that are going to disrupt those hormones, then it's kind of like you're wasting your time and money almost, because you're working so hard to fix them, but then you're going to go do other things that might disrupt them. And I'm not just talking estrogen and progesterone. We're talking thyroid. We're talking adrenal hormones. We're talking all the different hormones in our body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that we pay attention to what we're putting in and on our body, by the way. It's not just in, it's on as well, because we absorb about 60% of what we put on our body. So if you're putting things like endocrine disruptors, like phthalates and parabens on your body, they will disrupt those hormones that you're putting into your body and working so hard to get to rebalance, right? So it's really being mindful of all the different things that we come into contact with. Food, lifestyle. So if you're super stressed, well, it's going to throw your cortisol off, right? And I'm sure you talk about that a lot. So these are things that we want to make sure that, okay, we're going to, it's like setting ourselves up for success. We're going to hit that ball out of the ballpark. If we look at nutrition, if we look at our supplements, we look at our hormones, we look at our food, what we're putting in our body, we look at managing our stress, all it's going to do is help us live a healthier, happier, stress-free, symptom-less, not symptom-less, but less symptoms, right? So you're minimizing it. I'm not saying you can get rid of everything, but it'll help to minimize it, because then your body's functioning optimally and you're not putting any obstacles in its way.
Beautifully said. Now the trans fat oils, bad oils, bad seed oils.
Yeah.
What do you see in your research that these can do to the body? Like let's scare women a little bit, right? So that they get these oils out of their life. What does it do? What do those seed oils do to the body, and specifically as it's tied to menopause?
Okay, so it's a great question. So the woman who put seed oils on the map, if you haven't interviewed her, I will introduce you to her. Her name is Dr. Kate Shanahan. She is she's amazing. I love her. She's a friend of mine, and I've interviewed her several times. She's the one that put seed oils on the map by doing the research as to what it does to the body. And one of the major ways that it affects women in perimenopause and menopause is it can increase oxidative stress, which can increase inflammation in the body. And once inflammation is increased, we know that it's tied to chronic diseases. We know that it's tied to weight gain. It's tied to several different of the symptoms that we're experiencing. So we really want to be mindful of these seed oils. So I learned so much from Dr. Kate, because being a nutritionist, being in the natural health world for so long, I was already looking at a diet, my nutrition in a certain way. But I didn't really know that much about seed oils. I was like, oh, when organic companies started switching from canola oil to sunflower oil, I'm like, isn't that great? Because they're switching oils or moving away from rapeseed or canola oil. But what I found out from Dr. Kate is that these seed oils, and there's 8 of them that she talks about a lot. She calls them the hateful 8, I believe. And they're canola oil, soy oil, corn oil, they're cottonseed oil, which are the trans fats. It's sunflower, safflower, grapeseed. So these are different oils that you will find in a lot of products at home. So a lot of women will say, I cook with grapeseed oil. Well, grapeseed oil is a seed oil. So you want to be mindful of that. So That would be the main reason, but there are so many different reasons as to why and it's all backed by research by Dr. Kate Shanahan. So I highly recommend checking out, it's drkate.com. Her website is amazing. But I would say, staying away from it is important. Pains, aches and pains, brain fog, weight gain, all of that. So for me, going back to my story, but when I first interviewed her, I was already, I was having a lot of pains, like pins and needles in the bottom of my feet or pain in my body. And I interviewed her and she's like, they can be in everything. And I'm like, sunflower oil. So I went upstairs and I'm like, the only thing I really eat with a lot of that's a packaged food that has oil is my seaweed that I get from like this grocery store. So I went to look at it and I was eating one a day. Seaweed's great for our thyroid, right? This is why in my mind, I'm like, I want the iodine. I want to have so I went and looked at the package and lo and behold, it had sunflower oil in it. So I went off the sunflower oil and the pins and needles on the bottom of my feet. And it always happened in the morning when I woke up, went away. So I know now if I eat in a restaurant, I always ask them not to make it with seed oils or canola oil. It doesn't always happen, but I know I'll wake up the next morning if I've ingested seed oils with the pins and needles on the bottom of my feet. So it does go away really quickly. So the pain, so if you're having a lot of pain in your body and a lot of inflammation, one inexpensive way that costs you no money is to be mindful of those seed oils and what you're using to either cook with. So cook with olive oil, cook with, coconut oil in a smaller amount. I wouldn't cook with coconut oil, but if you're baking, avocado oil, even palm oil is kind of neutral. So those would be the better ghee, butter, grass-fed butter. These are all better options than using those seed oils.
Love it. Thank you for that breakdown. Yes, I do want an intro to Kate Shanahan because I would love to do a full podcast deep diving onto those seed oils.
Happy to do
And
that.
there was one point in time I interviewed Ben Azadi, and he was talking briefly about the seed oils. And he said, and this is a keto guy. He said, I would rather eat sugar than eat the seed oils as it relates to my insulin, my blood sugar control, being in ketosis, being a fat burner versus a sugar burner. Sugar is actually better for you than the seed oils. And that's a pretty big, bold statement right there. And that tells you how bad those seed oils are.
Yeah, they're really bad for you. So stay away from them as much as you can. And they're in everything, by the way. They're insidious. They're in there's so many packaged foods and it's hard to stay away from them. So that's why it comes down to, again, those decisions, but eating those whole foods and making what you can at home so that you don't have, you don't have to ingest those seed oils. They're literally in everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Keep going with the nutrition. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that women can start changing or we can keep moving down the supplement lifestyle path?
Yeah. One more thing I want to say about protein, and then we'll move on to lifestyle, is make sure that you're getting enough protein. So I was just having this conversation this morning with my friend, is that the focus on protein is literally fruits, like vegetables and protein need to be your number one focus. So focusing on the vegetables for the fiber, like we talked about, the protein though, why? So we want to make sure we get enough protein. First of all, protein won't have as big an effect as carbohydrates will on our blood sugar. It also helps to keep us satiated, right? So it helps to release hormones like CCK and peptide YY that help to keep us full. So starting a meal off with protein. So for me, again, perimenopause and menopause, what's so fascinating to me is that you can look at every other stage, and I'm going to talk about women's lives. You can, look at any other stage in a woman's life, and you could be like, well, you should do this, you should do that. When we get to this stage, what works best, and I'll talk from personal experience, starting my meal off with protein is key because it helps to satiate me. If I don't start my meal or if I don't have enough protein, we need to have, and now the formula is there's many different calculations, but in general, what people are saying is try to have 1 gram of protein per 1 gram of body weight. It might be hard to even reach that amount. Try for 30 grams per meal. Just try for 30 grams per meal. And the reason why is because, and so if I don't get my 30 grams in a meal, I'm hungry and I can't stop eating. And so I need to have that protein right at the beginning of my meal so that my brain gets like, whoop, whoop, turns on and be like, okay, time to stop eating soon. So I have my protein, then I'll have my vegetables and my, whatever it is, the rest, the complex carbohydrates and the nuts and seeds and the legumes. And if, again, not everybody, and I spoke to Ben Azadi, I was on his podcast, and not everybody can have the nuts and like if you're keto, especially, obviously. So you want to be mindful. Even me, I'm not keto, but if I have too many complex carbohydrates or too many nuts and seeds or too many legumes, It
Yep.
doesn't do well for my body. So we're
Same.
all so
Mhm.
different. So that's another really important point I want to make. Just because you hear something that be like, oh yeah, you should do this, you should do that. There's a million people out there who will tell you to eat a million different ways. At the end of the day, you are the boss. You know your body best. Do
Mhm.
what feels right for you. If it doesn't feel right for you to eat kale, don't eat kale. If it doesn't feel right to you to do a certain thing, then don't do it. Do what feels right for your body so that you could be pain-free, symptom-free, and that you can feel amazing. And don't forget, there's the whole cognitive aspect, right?
Mhm.
50% of the top 10 most common symptoms, by the way, are mental health and cognitive related. 50%. So it's not only physical, there's that emotional, mental component as well.
And I'm going to piggyback on that too. Number one, I don't think that we can say eat enough protein enough. I don't care if we say that once in every single podcast. If it drives home the point to
I
women
agree.
and it makes them increase their protein intake, then so be it. You're going to hear it over and over again. And number two, the I would say that eating protein, and the rule I always give out is 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So listen, if you're 200 pounds and you're like, man, my fighting weight is 160. I really want to get down to 160, 150. Then take the 150, 160 as your protein intake mark. So it's really lean body mass. But I think that that's the tried and true rule that crosses everyone everywhere. I don't care if you're keto, not keto, carnivore, whatever. Yes, just like you said, some people can tolerate additional carbohydrates. Some people can't, need to keep them a little bit lower, or the starchy ones
Depends on your
out and load up on.
genetics, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Genetics play a big role too.
But protein's kind of non-negotiable.
No, not I'm talking about when it comes to carbohydrates.
Right, right. The
Genetics play
carbohydrates
a
are,
role.
yeah. But
Yeah,
protein is that rule that permeates. I don't care who you are, where you are, how,
totally.
if you're insulin resistant or not, you have to get the protein in.
You have to get the protein in. And for some women, it might be hard to figure out what their lean body mass is. So that's why I always say, try an easier math calculation or whatever it is, or formula, whatever it is, but
Yeah.
try that 30 grams per meal if you can. And,
Mhm.
because it's very hard to get 40 to 50 grams per meal. And it's also, it's harder on our body. So, and again, many of us aren't eating as much. I hear this, and you probably hear this a lot too with your patients,
Mhm.
is that a lot of women are like, well, I don't understand why I'm gaining weight in this phase of life. I hardly eat. And
Yeah.
this is a big one. And let's unpack this for a second,
Mhm.
because in my book, I've actually spent a lot of time on this, Amy, because I was like, one of the main things that women are saying, like, help me lose weight, help me lose weight. And I'm like, well, let's talk about first, why are we gaining weight in this phase of life? And I have discovered that there are 16 different reasons as to why. That you're talking about, like, it's not just one or two reasons. You're
Whoa.
talking about 15 to 16 different reasons that we're gaining weight as we go into perimenopause and menopause. Let's go back to that, what's in our control versus what may not be.
Mhm.
A lot of that is not in our control. So it's really, doing things like focusing on that protein can help and make a big difference just by tweaking certain things, right? So it's just I always say be mindful.
Yeah.
Just be mindful. That's it.
Yeah. Be mindful. I like that.
Be mindful.
Okay. That was perfect. Now, should we move on to lifestyle? Because there's so many different things that people are doing or that they could be doing to help and that they are doing to kind of hinder themselves from feeling their best in their menopausal years.
Absolutely. So lifestyle is important for, because we have our adrenals. I'm looking for my props. I don't have them here. I usually have my props. So we have our adrenals, which sit above our kidneys. And when we're stressed, our adrenals secrete adrenaline or adrenaline and cortisol. A lot of women, a lot of you are probably, or listeners probably like, yeah, cortisol. I've heard that term before. It's a very well known, especially on social media. Everyone talks
Yeah.
about cortisol.
Right.
So the key is we need cortisol. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad hormone, but it's when it's in excess, when our body can't turn off the chronic stress response. So it goes up to our brain and it comes back to our adrenals. And eventually our brain has to say stop, and it doesn't. And because we're constantly stressed, right? It's our we're in a sympathetic mode when it comes to our nervous system. But the key is you want to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic to sympathetic. Like it's like this beautiful balance. The parasympathetic mode is that rest and digest mode. It's that mode where, if you're, in the caveman days or cavewoman days, we'll call it, when somebody saw a tiger, their body wasn't going to be digesting food. Their body was going to go, okay, here we go. Put on all your senses are heightened. You're going to run really fast, right? So this is where it's like in today's day and age, that tiger is everywhere we go because it's our work, it's our family, it's like we're constantly in that sympathetic mode.
Mhm.
So focusing on, so wait, actually, before I go there, is why is that important? Well, when we're constantly stressed, it's going to wear down our body and it's going to create other issues for us. But also it can, raise our blood sugar levels, right? It can lead to that memory loss. Like I know when I'm stressed, if I have a surge of cortisol and like something happens, like my blood sugar goes through the roof, my brain, I'm like, whoa, I did not even remember what I had for breakfast when my cortisol is high. It
Mhm.
literally can affect your body that quickly. And so we really want to make sure that we're managing our stress and our cortisol levels. It also affects our sleep. If your cortisol level is too high, going back again to the waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., right? So it literally, stress affects every part of our life. When
Mhm.
we're eating, if you're stressed, cortisol will actually impair your digestion. So you can go on and on as to all the different ways that it affects us in this, in perimenopause and menopause. So managing your stress is important. And going back to what we said before, walks in nature, all the tips that I gave earlier is important. You can even set times on your phone. Just breathe in 5 times. Even if you try it, like right now, take, a big breath in. So I always say if you can do box breathing, it's great.
Yeah.
Take a breath in for 3, take another breath in, hold it for a second, and then let it out for twice as long. So let it out for 6 to 8 seconds. And do that 2 or 3 times. You will feel your body just relax. And it works. And these are simple tips. Again, don't cost money that you can do within seconds or minutes to help your body relax. Go outside for a quick walk. If you're feeling stressed, go smell a flower, go put your hand on a tree to help ground you.
Mhm.
So these are things that can kind of help you bring you back down to, to stimulate that parasympathetic part of your nervous system so that you can feel less stressed and that you can hopefully feel less symptomatic as well.
Yeah, and I think the important thing too is a lot of times as women, we don't even know when we're stressed, but something that you said triggered something in my head, and I want to say it out loud for women to think of. So think about a time when you got bad news or somebody sent you a text that pissed you off. You had a fight with your husband, you had a fight with your friend, whatever, your kids pissed you off. And have you ever tried to still continue working when you are that stressed? So as you were talking, I was thinking about a time when I would be messaging my assistant and I'd be like, I, 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 I can't even form a sentence right now. I'll get back to you.
Totally.
I
Totally.
couldn't even think about what I needed to tell her because I was stressed about something else. And I think if all the women listening right now pause and think about that time and think about how your body reacted. Your brain didn't work. How do you expect your digestion to work? How do you expect your body to deal with anything that you put in your mouth? Your body is going to go, you know what? Screw this. We're storing it as fat, moving on. I mean, that's what it's going to do.
Yeah,
And
that's what it
how many
does.
of us just sit there and endlessly, mindlessly eat when we're stressed too? It's like, wait, where'd that jar of peanut butter or the ice cream go?
I would say
Well,
ice
it
cream
went
for
on your
me, like
hips because your body can't digest it.
no, like, I was gonna say peanut butter now, bring on the ice cream. And it's
Right.
interesting because not too long ago, and a lot of it, and I think this is important to say, is a lot of it are they're old programs. So as we, when we're in menopause and we're feeling better and we can work on ourselves spiritually, mentally, emotionally, one of the things I urge you to work on is looking at things that before may have triggered you or things that you're like, wait, I never really worked through that small T or big T trauma. Things that can now get exacerbated as you get here, or old programs that you're like, wait, is that still there? Like, and I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I got some really, I got stressed because I heard some really bad news.
Mhm.
Right away, I literally went to my fridge and I started eating everything in sight. Went to my cupboard,
Right.
eating everything in sight. But a few minutes later, I looked at myself. I said to myself, I'm like, whoa, this is old programming from like my teenage years. I had
Mhm.
not done that in so long. I'm like, okay, I recognize the pattern. I recognize what I'm doing. I'm going to stop now and I'm going to go for a walk. And I was able to stop it. So doing the work to try and figure out what it is that's triggering those actions in you at this phase of life is to basically say, okay, let's stop it and let's try to figure something else that may work. Because had I continued, first of all, I would have felt really not good. I would have felt sick to my stomach, right?
Mhm.
So that's the most important thing. And, and like you said, it can lead to weight gain and other things, which already many of us, and by the way, cortisol, a lot of it stores in the belly. So if you find you're getting a lot of that belly fat, cortisol has a lot to do with it. Not everything, but a lot to do with it. So managing your stress, I cannot stress enough the importance of really trying to manage those stressful events. And maybe they're not so stressful, but they're stressful to us now. We see things, we perceive things differently, we act on things differently. Everything is different now.
Mhm. And the belly fat too does not necessarily mean that your adrenals are blown out, because we hear that a lot. Like, well, I'm gaining weight in my midsection. It must just be my adrenals are shot. It's like,
No, no,
no,
no.
you're
There's a
just
million
not
reasons.
dealing with the stressors of day to day. I mean, we could test you and your cortisol pattern will look beautiful, but it's still affecting you because you're just stressed all the time and you're not managing it and how your body uses it.
100%. And also what you talk about a lot, go get your thyroid checked, get your
Mhm.
6 markers checked. Understand, could it be a thyroid issue that's experienced? What's your vitamin D level like? What's your B12 level like? What's your ferritin levels like? Because if
Mhm.
your ferritin levels are low, you're exhausted, chances are you're not walking around the block or exercising. So
Right.
everything is interconnected. And that's why those 15 different reasons that I'm writing about in my book, I'm like, okay, so we're going to have to try and figure out what it is. And maybe it's not one, maybe it's two, maybe it's not, whatever it is that's contributing to that. So controlling what we can control. And that's the key.
I love this. I absolutely love this. Okay, so we have time for one more lifestyle something something, or is there a really big tip that we have not talked about yet?
So I would say
Supplement,
the last
lifestyle, anything.
So I would say the last thing is supplements. So as a nutritionist, I hear this all the time is we don't need supplements. We just have to eat right. So absolutely foundation of everything is eating right. So we talked about that a lot on this podcast. Focus on food. Food is the foundation. You could do a lot with food.
Mhm.
However, our soil is deficient in nutrients. We know that. The United Nations, they came out with a report. We know that our soil is deficient in nutrients and that we need extra supplementation, not to take over. It's supplementing, right? So it's not
Right,
replacing. And that's an
right.
important point. So I do believe we need supplements, but I also want to be clear you shouldn't take everything and anything under the sun. So, like Amy, you're speaking to your patients. You're not going to tell them to take a million things if you're working on thyroid health,
Right.
right? You're going to be
Exactly.
very specific with here's what you need to do to deal with your thyroid. So that's why for me too, when it comes to supplements, I always say there's foundation supplements that every woman in the stage should have. And that's
Mhm.
why, for me, fiber is key, soluble fiber. For me, magnesium, it's a non-negotiable.
Yep.
Omega 3s, non-negotiable. And
Mhm.
those are my three that every woman should have in this phase of life because for the most part, most of us are deficient or need more of it, right? And they benefit so many different symptoms that it's so important to have. So I would say be mindful of the supplements you're taking. Don't take everything and anything just because someone is telling you to take it. Work with either a qualified practitioner or doctor or healthcare provider that understands, or speak to a company like me. Like, so for example, when anybody buys a product from me, we send out detailed information how to take them. I hold your hand. I'm always accessible. So these are important because supplements do work. And I'll give you an example. Melatonin. So we have a product called Sleep Us. It's a product that I formulated myself. I am so proud of this product because we need to sleep better. We have
Right.
our magnesium. You take it with our Sleep Us. It's made with 4 branded, super incredible hero ingredients.
Okay.
But melatonin, some women have tried it. It doesn't work for them. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
Right.
But some people, maybe you'll try a melatonin. It has melatonin in it. Maybe you'll try a melatonin product and you're like, well, I wake up groggy. Well,
Mhm.
what we know from our research is that maybe that grogginess, how much are you taking? What type are you taking? Is it sustained release? Is it not? Like there's so many questions that go around it, right?
Mhm.
So maybe you need to give your body time to acclimate. That grogginess we find might go away after a week or two. And then that you don't have that grogginess anymore. Or maybe if you're taking a brand of melatonin that has 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams or whatever it is of melatonin, maybe that's just too much for you.
Right.
Take less. Start with my motto is less is more. Start with less. Start with 1 capsule that has 1.5 milligrams of melatonin in our Sleep Us, and
Mhm.
then go up from there. Listen to your body. So don't give up on supplements just because you tried it once and it didn't work. Supplements are that. It takes time. They're not medication. It takes time to build up in your system, especially now. It might take you 2, 3 months to build things up in your system. Some things you might feel right away, like a fiber. You could probably feel it right away. A magnesium, you might feel it right away. It can help you with sleep as well. So
Mhm.
just give it time and be patient with yourself. And I think that's an important thing to say. And I know you have supplements as well. And it's changing our mindset around them that they're not medications and they do take time to work. But, in many cases, know what you're taking. Please just don't take things because someone told you to take it
Right. Or you saw it on Instagram and you
or
decided.
TikTok or wherever.
Right.
Exactly. And there's a lot of harm that can be done. For example, like there was a trend that was going around on TikTok to take high levels of copper to help get rid of gray hair. I was like, okay, we have to be really careful with that one because,
Yeah.
copper can throw zinc out of balance. So you
Right.
can't just go take things just because you see it as a trend. Speak to somebody that understands supplements.
Yes. 100%. And our lines absolutely complement each other. So we're going to put
I
you've been
love it.
generous to give the audience a discount code. It's Amy 15 off. We'll put that in the show notes along with the link to your supplements and then how everybody can find you. But any mega important parting words before we let you go? Because this has just been, I have a smile on my face. This has been awesome. I can't wait to
Oh, thank
release this
you.
and get this out to my people, my audience, because it's a message they need to hear. They need to hear it.
Thank you, Amy. First of all, I really appreciate it. And I'm excited for you to be on my podcast too. So this is great. I would just say be patient with yourself. So our bodies are changing and a lot of great things are to come. Be patient, give yourself grace. Know that this is for many of you who are experiencing the brain fog and the forgetfulness and all of these symptoms. For many of us, it's temporary. It does get better when you get to the other. I always say, welcome to the other side when you're in menopause. So it does get better for so many of us. And control what you can control. So be the captain of your own ship. It's up to you to make those decisions of what you want to do and not do. And for me, I would just say good luck. And if you have any questions, I'm available. You can always reach me. You can come to my website, which I know you're putting links to below. You can find me on social media. I answer the questions and I don't want you to feel like you're alone. And I think that's the most important thing is you're not alone. You have support, you have validation from me, from Amy, from a lot of different creators out there who are in this phase of life and you've got this. You've got this. So you're not alone. You've got a team behind you.
Beautiful. So well said, Andrea. Thank you so much for your time today and everything that you gave the audience. It's priceless. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me.